Body wonders how to camo itself again today. Language contorts itself to remove the parts of it that doesn't seem to fit in with the norm. And through it all, I walk forward, crack myself back and posture myself as a king. A king that has learned to kick past his insecurities. And through it all, I walk forward, not knowing what society will throw at me, not knowing what will throw my way to bury me, and to bury my black pride, dodging everyone with a smile, roam through my mind, through the memories of what it means to be black, what it means to be proud. I use that to keep me going. And through it all, I walk forward. Walk to my dreams. With head up high, with pride in my heart, I walk forward. See, looking at the first 11 lines shows how subconsciously thinking, purging the doubts of my mind shown. Because I am black and raw, showing all my flaws. And through it all, yes, I walk forward.
So, Sydney, welcome to the Black and Raw podcast. It's really good to have you on.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
No, it's all right. It's all right. So, I'd just like you to, just so my audience can get a bit more about you, understand who you are. I'd love for you to just share a bit more about your background and I guess how those experiences have shaped you to be the poet and writer you are now.
Okay, yes, for sure. Background. I think my background has been one of a lot of highs, a lot of lows. I've lived I'm only 27, but I've had a lot happen in my life, both traumatic, both amazing. And I think it's made my work more selfless, I would say. I like to describe myself as an author who likes to give light to other people.
Okay.
A lot of my poetry books and the books that I'm going to be producing in the future is more highlighted on the message of others and letting them speak. But I'm just a writer behind it. So my experiences have definitely made me a more selfless author, more selfless writer, focusing more on the voices of others and how I can translate that in an authentic way.
Yeah. Oh, very interesting. No, I like that. And you said that for someone that's only 27, that you've been through quite some highs, quite some lows. Can you just tell me a bit about those?
Where do I start? I would say just from the moment I was born, I was born in a war. I was born in a civil war, and that's the first one. And I think that's something where, speaking to a lot of people, that's something, because I was just a baby at the time, it can lead to people to it affects how people see the world, essentially. I was just very young, so I took it as I, in the past, put a lot of pressure on myself of why am I alive, why am I here, my part, like the weight of what could have been. This happened and I died, like that kind of thing. I used that weight for me for a long time, and I think it's only recently that I'm learning to take that weight and go, okay, yes, it's affected me, but how can I use my experience to help others, but also learn more about it by myself? Yeah.
Yeah.
I came to the UK when I was 5 and was in a very conservative religion, which I'm still processing that now, processing how that made me feel. And as I left eventually. And yeah, depression, mental health, and anything I missed? Oh, nursing students, just a list.
Quite a bit, yeah. And I think, as you were telling me before when we had the conversation that the Civil War was in Sierra Leone, and that's where you were born, and yeah, I do quite of like I'm a social worker. I work with lots of children and families, but I was also reading a book called The Body Keeps a Score. Really good book. Anyone, I'd recommend it. But the fact that you're saying like being born in a war shapes your perspective on how you view the world. And even though it was something which, you said it was when you were 5, you ended up moving to the UK. So people might think, oh, what did he experience? Like what could a child experience that they don't probably remember that? But in the book, it was saying how like your body literally keeps the trauma of that in you, and that shows up in lots of different ways.
I agree, 100% agree. I like how you worded it as well. The body does keep a score. In ways that I'm still learning, it's because when you're very young, everything is subconscious because you really formulate the memories of what's happening because you're very young. Your brain doesn't have the language to actually formulate the memories. So everything was just, I think I'm now unpacking all those scores and everything it meant and contextualizing it. How is it affecting me? How can I use it to help others? How can I use, kind of sounds cheesy, I can use the gift that I have of being creative and being a good writer, being a good poet to, one, heal myself from these things, because I think that's another, healing yourself, because that's the great thing I love about writing is not only as an author, you're giving to others and you're giving others a healing platform. In the process of writing and publishing, you're healing yourself. So, yeah, I definitely agree with that statement of your body keeps a score. And for me, it's just how do I check off these scores and look at these scores and analyze them and actually help myself through it.
Yeah. And yeah, I think it's that figuring out the sort of stage that's, I guess, kind of the hard part, isn't it? Something happened to you, but it's the unpacking of all of that. And I've heard quite a few people that have talked about, like quite a few authors and poets and writers that say that like when unpacking all of the stuff in whatever medium they're writing, that it sort of is a therapy for you because you're getting to like you're reliving all these events and all the things that have happened to you, and it's not necessarily in a way that's like, I don't know, it could be re-traumatic. Sometimes bringing up traumatic things can re-traumatize people, but they've described it as being something quite cathartic and actually helping them process what happened.
I agree with that. I think it's what stage you're at with the memory. I think there are some topics that I've written before where I've not been at the point where I can look at it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was re-traumatizing because you need sometimes some time as a social worker yourself. You may be people you're working with who, like kids and teenagers who need a lot of time to just sit with their thoughts and process it before they can talk about it in a deeper levels. Kind of have to go by stages. And there are some topics where I'm way too early to write about this. Yeah. It still hurts a bit too much. But most of the time, this is just for myself, I don't know about other writers, the time that my creativity wants to talk about a certain topic that I've gone through, it's when I've healed enough to talk about it.
Yeah.
And that's just how my brain works. Not all the time. Sometimes it's too early, and I'm like, let's pack this poem away or pack this. But most of the time is my body going, okay, we're ready to talk about this. But I'm not sure about other writers, but I know that's the case for me.
That's for you, yeah. And I guess how have these challenges impacted you as a person, but also just the themes that you write about in your poetry?
I think it gives me context. I break that down as I break out the first half, me as a person. Context, I think. There are certain things that I now. So like certain things don't bother me now. So
Okay.
good example, in the midst of the pandemic, when I know a lot of people were scared because quite rightfully it's one of the biggest things that's ever happened in their life before.
Mm-hmm.
Me, I was a lot calmer because I had things that were comparable to it. So if the pandemic was a 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10, I can look back in my childhood and go, well, the war was a 9 out of 10. That was pretty bad.
Yeah, just a little bit.
The depression I went through was a 9 out of 10. So even though it was bad,
Mm-hmm.
compare it and go, okay, I survived and I lived through and I pushed through these that were 9 out of 10s, 10 out of 10s, 8.5 out of 10s. I can go through COVID.
Yeah.
I can like so it's main I I'm a lot more calmer. I'm a lot more able to process difficulties. It's not that it doesn't affect me, but I have a reference of what I've been through and what I can go through.
Yeah. Just following on from that point quickly before you answer the second point. I know I was reading David Goggins' book ages ago. And he talks about the cookie jar and how that, say if you're, I don't know why I said happy birthday, then those balloons came up. He was talking about the cookie jar and he was saying that every time, I think he's doing it when I say cookies, every time something, like you're going through something, he's like, get that and like put it into a jar and put it with some cookie, like think of that as like cookies. So like then when you are coming back to another stressful time, you can be like, oh, I've already been through something similar to this. So you can be like, okay, let me pull this out of cookie jar because I've done this. I've been through this. I can
Yeah.
get through this again. And when you were just talking about that, saying that, with the pandemic, it was awful. But for someone that was born into a civil war, that was comparable. As you're saying with your depression, that it was comparable. So that when other things come up, you're like, yeah, I've got this.
I've developed that through sports for me because I did track and field. I was a sprinter for such a long time, and I did 400 meters. So for the listeners who are 400-meter runners, you would know where I'm coming from in this, where in for every week I would have to do what I would call hell on earth sessions. I look back now and I'm like, why did I put my body through that much pain? But I did. But I developed that through being able to do very hard sessions that mentally pushed you.
Yeah.
Once my coach said we're doing 10 400 meters very fast with very short recovery. So I built up that thinking of, okay, if I can go through these tough situations, I can go. I just basically transferred the lessons I learned in sports from, okay, cool, we're doing this hard session. Cool, I've done something worse before.
Yeah.
Let's go. Right. And I just transferred that into everyday life. So yeah, I think I kind of stumbled onto that way of thinking just by sports. But yeah, I think that cookie jar analogy is 100% true.
Yeah, I don't think I put it as eloquently as Goggins did in his book. But yeah, I found it quite useful. And then in terms of how have those experiences influenced the themes in your poetry?
Ooh. It's made me more sympathetic. One thing I found I can do is, because of everything that's happened, I'm able to relate to other people's pain. I'm a little more empathetic in that side of things. So I do write works where I write through that lens of other people. I've not really published any of those pieces yet, but I find that especially the people who've died in the past, who doesn't get a lot of recognition,
Hmm.
being going through a tough time and reading through their tough times, you're able to kind of understand some of the things they're going through. You're able to go, okay, I can understand this. And so when you want to write through their eyes and show who they were, it's a lot easier to portray who they were. So I think that's how it's directly affected my work. But it's also, I think it sounds like a bit weird, but it's put a hopeful sense to my work. Because I've noticed every time I write a piece that starts off incredibly negative,
Yeah.
it always ends up having somewhat of a motivational theme at the end.
Hmm.
Like, this is how bad it can be, but this is how we get better. And I noticed this like a few months back when I've never written a truly depressing poem.
Okay.
It's always had a thing of, oh, this is very hard, but now he's the light at the end of the tunnel. And I think that's how my experiences have affected my work. I always have some light at the end of the tunnel, even if the topic is very hard and impactful. And I think I just do subconsciously at this point in time. But it's just something I realized consciously a few months ago.
Yeah. So it's yeah. So I guess how you approach life, how you've been through things, that is showing up in your work. Because as you're saying, there's things that you've been through, but there's always sort of that light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah. Yes.
And you like, I, you know what? Like, I don't know what I don't know. Don't know why I said that. Um, but no, I hear you because I think one thing which we always sort of focus on, like, is change. Like, change is something that always happens to us a lot.
Yeah.
People are scared of it, but I think the one thing that I sort of got comfortable with change is that like it's just change is inevitable. It's
Yeah.
gonna happen. Something is going to change. So like when people are in situations that are really awful, your situation never lasts forever. Even though in that time it feels like it's gonna be going on for so long. But with that sort of view that change is inevitable, like things are gonna get better. Things might get worse. Don't get me wrong.
Mm.
I'm not saying it always gets better, but it's not always going to be that same. You're not gonna always be in that suck moment.
And I think change is one of those things where, like I said, it's inevitable, but it's necessary.
Mm,
Mm. Because one, if you're not changing as you grow older, you're not adding tools to your tool belt. You're not adding mechanisms to make life better. Essentially, you're not adding on to the foundation of who you are.
mm,
Um, but I definitely get why it's scary because it's a thing of change is a what if, is the unknown, essentially.
yeah.
And if you ask anyone, look at this unknown abyss, you're going to jump in. People are like, oh no.
Go. You can't see the
Right.
path, but just jump.
Hold on. Yeah. It could be the best thing in the world. It could be the worst, but because I have a psychology background as a social worker, you might understand where it's the unknown, the fear, the ambiguity. It does hold people back from doing actions. I know it from a therapist. Like I know my mom's a social worker, so I
Yeah.
see. I know it from a academic way, but you've seen it in a more practical way, where there might be some um, people you're working with who just like, oh, this is how you can get better, but like, I'm so scared of moving forward because it's the unknown. So it's so necessary, but uh, anyone that's anyone that accepts change and does it, even though they may push back against it and resist with all their might, I just commend them
Yeah.
because that's them going to their body, that's their body going, I don't want to jump, and going, cool, we're jumping anyway.
Yeah. Um, I can't remember, it's a quote somewhere where someone says courage is not acting without fear, but it's acting in the essence of fear or something, or it's acting with fear.
Yeah.
and you need courage to make changes to your life, don't you? Like, and yeah, it's scary. But I think, as you're saying, you're not adding to the tool belt of your life. You're sort of just staying stagnant. And some people are okay with staying stagnant, but I think when we're talking about, if you want situations to change, then you've got to change. You've got to go through that, you know. You were saying before that you had depression. Some people have depression and are scared of taking medication. I understand medication is not for everybody. Don't get me wrong,
Mm.
but some people need it to go through a change where they're then going to feel better. And that doesn't mean you have to be on medication all your life. But there's things like that which are scary, and there's loads of things which are scary, which you sort of have to push through. I say have to because that's just how I view it, but some people don't want to. But I think you have to.
Mm. I agree. I agree with that. I actually have a question for you. I have a question
Now
for
go
you.
on.
Because I think you have to, because it. I think maybe it's the athlete side of me where there's always a better.
Hmm.
Oh, no, I'm doing really good at this. What's better, right? And that's how I think. And personally, that's sometimes for me. That's like a. I don't know. I say something a bit too ambitious, and I push myself too hard. And I'm like doing. I'll say sometimes I'm like, I need to climb Mount Everest. My brain's saying that's what you're doing, and I'm like, oh gosh, why did I say I'm climbing Mount Everest? Now I have to climb Mount Everest. But that's how my brain works. There's always a better.
Hmm.
Oh, this. Okay, what's the next massive goal that I'm gonna regret doing, but I know I'm still gonna do it. Um, but I think the question I have for you is about that needing to change. How, from your professional perspective, how do you not persuade, but talk through people who need to change, but help them through that process?
That's interesting. That's a very interesting question. Um, So there's a thing called Cycle for Change, and it's sort of, I think it has, I haven't read much up on it actually, but it's something which we talk about in social work quite a lot. Um, and I think people have to be in a certain place to be ready for change, or to even sort of take the steps to make change. And I think, obviously, for quite a lot of the people that I work with, and people just in general, to be honest with you, everyone has trauma. Everyone has things which they've been through, which either reduce their appetite for change. And I think it's sort of trying to see where people are at, and then trying to then move them through those stages and help them through them. But sometimes, we can ask people to do certain things, and it's like, right, you got to do this, you got to do that to change, you got to do this to change. But like right now, they're not even in a space where they can contemplate that. Like, I've worked with a child before where it's been really hard getting him to school or been getting him to something. And, there's a lot of things where there's trauma behind why they don't want to go to school. And you got to sort of try and unpack that bit, and then try and help them realize that, okay, what you are scared of, yes, it seems scary, but once you do it and once you push through it, trust me, you won't be scared anymore. You'll start
Mm.
to build those things of, oh, I can do this. Oh, let me try this. Let me try that. Let me try that. So I think also with change, you've got to try and help people have small incremental changes. Trying to achieve something huge always seems more daunting than just trying to achieve something small. Um,
Yeah.
there's this what is it? Oh, there's this Friends episode where um what's his name? Not Joey. The guy that just died recently. I forgot his character.
Uh,
Matthew Perry.
so
Chandler.
Perry,
Yeah, Chandler.
what's his name?
Um,
His name is Perry, but I can't remember the first name.
Matthew Perry.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Episode where he runs away because he's scared to marry Monica. And then Ross
Mm.
is like, okay, let's just try one thing at a time. Let's try putting your tie on. Let's try putting your shirt on. Let's try walking to the door. Let's try walking to the aisle. Let's try this. So, like, I view that as sort of a way to help people change. Just like, let's just try this one small thing. Okay, you done that. Brilliant. Praise them as well, because that was a scary thing for them to do. Try this next thing. Try that next thing. Keep pushing, keep pushing. So it seems easier. And then, once you've done it, like, climbing Mount Everest, you never think of, oh my gosh, I got to get to the top, do you? You think, let me at least get to this peak and then that
Yeah,
peak and then this peak. So that's sort of how I view helping people through change.
cool.
So yeah, thank you for asking me that. And I like when people ask me questions and ask questions back.
Like I'm like there's certain things I have a lot of conversations with my mum about social work, and it's one I always find it quite interesting because I'm more psychologically based. I have a psych degree, and I just like seeing this. I think social work is so important because it's the practical element of sociology and psychology.
Mm.
It's how can we apply it to people and their lives, and yeah, and it's something I can never always get in that mindset, but I understand the mindset, so I kind of always have questions about that.
Yeah, no, thanks. Yeah, to be fair, I did my undergraduate in psychology and criminology.
Mm.
I did my A level in psychology and sociology, and well, I tried biology and all of that, but that was long. I failed that massively, so maybe I wasn't the science guy. But yeah, I've always liked those. I've always liked sort of understanding about people, and sort of figuring out where they are. Because even with that psychology, even like with psychology, like there's loads there's not loads, but you have to understand human development and how trauma and brain patterns, and that then helps you do the physical part. That helps you do
Yeah.
the practical part, doesn't it? Um, so I know in one of your poetry books, Looking Through the Black Window,
Mm.
um, and I feel like the aim of it was to sort of portray a more well-rounded view of the Black experience.
Yeah.
And for you, how did you achieve this goal? And like, how did you sort of add historical references in the poetry?
How did I achieve this goal? I think going back to the point how my past is affecting my writing, I am, and my goal of writing has always been how do I tell other people's stories
Mhm.
through my, um, which is how and I know that's very unusual for a lot of poets because more poetry is self-expression, and I do that myself. I have written, I think I've got like like poetry journals, probably like 4,000 poems. So I do write for myself, but the things I
Yeah.
give to people, helping others through their voice, helping others through my voice, that kind of thing. Um, so I think that's one aspect. When it comes to the public face of me as a writer, as an author, I've always been, how can I get other people's viewpoints? So I've been very open-minded. So when I was writing that book, I was I got inspirations from family, from friends, conversations I've had. There's one poem in the book called Nevada. Yes, and it shows how much I know my own books sometimes. I've written. And Ode to the Black Woman. That's it.
Okay.
Gosh, I write too much.
No such thing, mate. No such thing.
And those are poems that the actual contents of the poems have just been stuff that Black women have told me.
Mm.
Conversations like, how does it feel like being a Black woman? And this collection of conversations over the years came into those two poems of this is Black love, this is Black female empowerment. Yes, it's by a Black man, but I'm essentially just highlighting and amplifying the voices of the Black women around me who have told me these stories, who have told me these experiences, and I just compiled them into one little piece. So I think that's how I've achieved the goals of representing what it means to be Black in society. Is all my poems in that book is less me speaking, more me
Mm.
compiling all the things people have told me. Me compiling all the lessons people have told me and their experiences and going, okay, in this poem, there's 5 people. There are 5 people's experiences. Here you go.
Yeah.
There's, that kind of thing. I think that's how I've done it, just by having an open mind and having a style having a writing philosophy that's naturally, how can I show up other people? How can I show off other people through my work?
Yeah. And I like how you haven't, you know, how some people try and write something and they sort of try and go off their own understanding or their own experience and write it through their own lens.
Mm.
And you can, so when you're reading something, you can be like, yo, you haven't captured what people go through, or you haven't captured the target audience who you're trying to achieve this for. So I like how you were like, it's from conversations, it's from talking to people, and not necessarily interviewing them and be like, what's going on for you, but getting people
Mm.
when their guard is down, and it's just a conversation, it's just a chat.
I think a big important. Sorry, someone said a question. What's the difference between a writer and an author? And I think you just kind of summarized it there. An author is someone, no matter what you do, if it's novel writing, short story, no matter what type of writing you do, even songwriting, as long as you're giving it to someone, there's an element of how do you highlight others as an author of any genre is how is my message going to affect others? And there's always an element that is yourself. Um, I think I'm not sure if I ever published this poem, but I wrote a poem of like anytime a poet is writing or writer's writing about love, tragedy, everything, you have to put a bit of your soul onto it, right? But that doesn't mean the whole poem is the whole piece, the whole story is about you. It can be 10% of you, 90% of others, because it's impossible to write something without putting your own self into it. It's impossible. So that's one aspect, but it's just how much of other people's viewpoints do you put in?
Yeah.
And I think that's the difference of being an author incorporates other people into their work, subconsciously or consciously. How does this character appeal to this group of people? How does this poem appeal to this person? How can I help this group of people through this character or this storyline? Or you can see how other people are getting involved. No, how can I help myself with this character? I think that's an author, and you have people who are writers who write for themselves. And if you're writing for yourself, yeah, put all yourself into it.
Yeah.
Because for yourself, it's self-therapy. Like again, I wrote 4,000 poems. Only I think 30 of them are out there for the world. 3,970 of myself, self-therapy. So the writer in me writes for myself, the author in me writes for other people.
Okay. I never thought about that difference. That's quite interesting, actually.
If you authors, they may have a different answer, but that's my definition of.
The next author or writer I'm going to interview, I'm going to ask them. I'm going to ask them what their view is on that. Do you ever read back through the poems that you write for yourself?
Oh, I would love to say I do, but not all. I like there's sometimes where when I'm not creative, or sometimes I'll do second editions of a poem.
Mm-hmm.
For example, I re-edited a poem that I wrote in like 2016 into my new style. And I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. Oh, I used all these techniques before. Now I don't use these techniques before. So sometimes I do it. My style is I tend to do only one or two edits.
Okay.
Because I always struggle because I struggle with over editing my work. So that's why I limit myself to one or two edits of, okay, cool. If I'm going to write this, I'm going to show it to the world. One or two edits, done. If it's a book that I'm publishing or producing, then it's a bit more of a different story because I need to do maybe 3-4 edits, get my readers along. They give me the feedback. But if it's something like a poem I'm doing for a magazine or a piece that I'm giving to one person that doesn't involve a full manuscript, one or two edits, just because it's so easy to overanalyze and over edit yourself. But that's me personally. I know other authors, and especially poetry is a bit different. I know other poets that will do 5, 10 revisions because that's how their brain works. They edit this, change this, change this. So everyone's a little bit different. For me, one or two, probably 60, 50% of my pieces is I've written it, don't touch it again.
Don't touch it. I guess, yeah, as you said, everybody's different, isn't it? Because some people, I don't know whether that's a method for you, because as you were saying before, that sort of how you view, change and how you view progressing is that what's the next goal? What's the next this? And sometimes you're too hard on yourself. So I think for you, you've probably developed that to be like, I don't want to procrastinate on this. I don't want to keep editing. As you're saying, you can over edit. So you would rather just get it out and sort of let it be rather than never put out anything.
And I think there's also a level of confidence in one's own writing ability, because one of the best advice I've ever been given, and this is an advice to anyone who wants to be a writer, is be confident in your own voice. Because that's just when I really just started really getting into writing. And I spoke to someone who's more established in New York. He's kind of his first name, but he's an amazing guy. Poet, playwright, does theatre as well. And he says he basically said, what is your voice? Because writing has so many techniques, metaphors, anything you can use. And it's kind of like a sweet shop of, there's all these techniques and methods and methodologies. And he said, what's your methodology? How do you put all of these voices together? How do you put all these techniques together to make your voice and your style? And once you know your voice, you can write something and not touch it again, knowing, cool, I know how I write. I know without doing a second edit, I use a lot more metaphors. My writing style is a bit more to the point. I'm less technical in the sense of I'm not a rhyming poet. I'm more of a verse poet. Because I'm so assured in my writing voice, I can write something once, do some spell checking, obviously, and put it out there to the world and not overthink it.
Yeah, that's a very good piece of advice, actually. And I think it also sort of tells you to like trust your gut, doesn't it? I think for me, something I sometimes struggle with is that I won't go with my gut. And it might be on small things, but like sometimes I feel like if you do it on all those small things, you're really not going to trust yourself on the bigger things. But something will happen. I'll be like, I knew I should have gone with my gut with that, or I knew where that was. And you just think, should have just done it. But it's very hard sometimes to go with just sort of your gut feeling. And even though, go on.
Stuff. I think it's hardest to do when it comes to life stuff, because when it comes to artistic measures, you can have essentially people validate what you do. Like the best musicians can be like, oh, this is my style, this is my voice. And you have people give you praise and go, oh, okay, wait, I like this. Okay, this voice is established. People can listen and watch my thing and go, I like this. In life is less so often. Like normally people come up to you and say, oh, I really like how you do this or do this or do this. You kind of have to just assume you're doing good.
Yeah, I think maybe, I don't know. I feel like you probably go with your gut, and then you just you understand, or you find out eventually maybe that wasn't the best decision, or it's like, oh, this went really well. Like I'm glad I went with my gut. So I think sometimes you got to use your head and your heart. And sometimes if you think, if they're aligned, then it's great. No worries at all. But then if there's a conflict, then it depends. It does depend on what you do then. I wanted, in terms of looking through the black window, I think we talked about it and touched on it a little, about sort of emotions and how you can use writing to help you process your emotions. But I guess in terms of that book being put out, how do you think it makes it more accessible to people to start reflecting on their own emotions, or even maybe seeking therapy, or deciding to journal, or deciding to write a poet, or there's so many things you can use as a cathartic to get your emotions out.
Yeah, so that poem was based on a principle in psychology of, for you to process your emotion, you have to first recognize that emotion. You to process that you're sad, you must actually recognize that I am sad, because there's so many people that will be in denial about that thing. And what that book is about is essentially, if you're in, the book is separated into three sections. So the first one is happy feelings. So when you're feeling happy and you're like, oh, I want to just show how happy I was. I want to read something that fits the mood that I'm in. You can. And from there, you can go, okay, cool. I'm really happy. I had a great day. Okay. I read something that made me even happy. Now, what do I do with this emotion?
Mm-hmm.
And so I go on from this emotion. And the same with sadness. Oh, I'm feeling very sad. Okay. It may sound kind of contradictory, and now I'm going to read something sad. But let me read something sad that actually makes me go, okay, this is how I feel. I feel like this. This poem represents how I feel. Okay, now how do I move on from this? Because I get, and this is going back to the subconscious thing of all my poems, even when sad, has an uplifting thing at the end, an uplifting message at the end. So you're going, okay, cool. I'm not feeling a great day. I've read this poem. Okay, now what can I do? How can I move forward? I've acknowledged that I am sad. I've acknowledged that I'm feeling anxious, or whatever that negative or positive emotion may be. Okay, now how do I move forward? I think that is more important definitely with negative emotions, because you really don't want to dwell on that negative emotions, because it can just tarnish the rest of your day. So it's like, okay, I've acknowledged it. Okay, now maybe I will read a book, or go do yoga, or talk to a friend, or something with it. And the third section is chaos, because life sometimes doesn't have an order.
Yeah.
Sometimes you be happy and sad at the same time, and you're like, But when you're feeling all these mix of emotions, going, okay, I've read a poem that reminds me of how I feel. What do I do with it next? How do I process it next? I've identified it. Now, how do I solve it or stay in it? Because, sometimes you want to, like, with a happy feeling, you want to stay in it. Like, oh, I identified I'm having the best day ever. How do I stay in it? Kind of thing. So that's, go back to the question, that's why the book is, especially useful for mental health, really. It's recognizing how you feel, and then processing it, and maybe staying with it, or finding a way to reduce it.
Yeah. So sort of, as you were saying, like, it's about like identifying your emotions, and being able to not sort of be in denial about what's going on for you. And yeah, I think being in denial can be so easy, can't it? But I think when you're in denial, that you're then looking around at everything else, and there's still that sort of small little inner frustration in you, where it's like, why aren't things changing? Why is this still staying the same? But you haven't actually addressed the most important question: is what are you denying? What are you in denial of yourself?
And I would say, there's another point that you made as well about the mental health parts and getting people into therapy, especially as Black men. If you go to someone and say, go to a guy and be like, you need to go to therapy, they're like, oh, it's really big. And from a psychology background, I get why therapy is scary, because if someone says, I need like therapy, what type of therapy? CBT, DBT, social therapy, like there's a plethora of all music therapy.
Play
Uh,
therapy.
it can be terrifying. You don't know what's going to come out. You don't know how you're going to deal with it. You don't know if you're going to find a therapist that you like that's very good that connects with you. Because another barrier to therapy is sometimes as much as you have the therapist that has the knowledge, you don't have a therapist that understands you or you connect with. And that's another part as well.
Mm.
And what this book does is a middle ground of it's not therapy, but it has a therapy concept. And even if you go into the academic side from academic therapy, that itself is a lot more confusing because you have all these ideas, these concepts, these theories that are very useful to know about, but to describe it is to make it very academic, and people go, "Oh my word, I didn't know there was this part of the brain and this lobe that does this." And
Yeah, the prefrontal cortex does that, and yeah, the hindbrain, all of them things.
which is why I think this book I love because it just goes, "What's a very simple principle in therapy and psychology? How can I disseminate it to the wider public in a very easy way to understand?"
Mm.
So, as much as I love the concept, I love the details and the concepts because I'm a nerd in that way. And I will talk about how kids learn how to speak and all the processes. But I know people don't have 5 hours to talk. So for me, it's like, yeah, I'm going to take a simple concept and make it generalizable to people who know nothing about psychology, nothing about therapy.
So I guess that's also how you've brought in your knowledge of psychology um in with that as well. And yeah, I think some of the best communicators and writers are able to put like big concepts into something small and simple for people to understand. And it's quite a skill, it's quite a talent to be able to do that.
Yeah, it's very difficult. And I think one part of it is knowing that concept and that idea so well. And again, I'm a nerd. I love all the fine details about these things. But it's also understanding, having I say empathy of understanding how hard it is. Because you can have someone who knows everything and goes, "Oh, it's easy. Everyone, you should know this." Like,
Yeah.
but it's knowing very, very difficult. Yes, I know this, but I have the context of being in this field or being an academic in this field. So it may be easier for me, but that doesn't mean it's easier for everyone else. And sometimes that's very hard to understand.
Yeah, I think like one thing which when you were talking about that, it's like especially in social work, like I had to do my master's for 2 years, and I didn't have to do. I could have done I could have done social work as an undergraduate and done that for 3 years, but I did psychology and criminology. I also did A levels. Um, so for someone who has been through academics and education quite a lot, you can maybe then go in and working with families and be like, oh, I know this, I know that. Like, oh, let me tell them about this, let me tell them about that. But you really got to meet people where they're at, like, and you sort of can't come in with I know everything, because one, that person's life experience, you don't know, you don't know what they've been through, you don't know how that's impacting them. But also at the same time, me going like, oh, because your mom treated you badly, that means you're treating your kids badly. Like, I can't go into attachment theory and start to explain this is why this is happening for you. um so you really got to be able to, I guess, disseminate the things that you know into something digestible. Um,
Mm.
because not everybody is as fortunate as you to have a university, um, of what do you call it, to have a university degree, or to have done A levels, or um, so I think it's something where yeah, it's being able to come to where people are at and provide something, use your information to then help and support others.
Mm.
Um, I think it's a gift, really, um, because it means one, you're in quite a fortunate position, but also at the same time, you can also learn something from people, and then you can also help people learn something about themselves.
Yeah, I think, and going sometimes to the Black community, like being some families, especially somewhere in the UK, being a minority means statistically you will earn less money. And I used to be an educator, worked in schools. The way the school system is, it doesn't always feel welcoming of minorities and Black kids. And that's another conversation in itself. So it means that some of these things, like education, is a privilege. It really is. And if, let's say, as a kid, you did not like education and academia because of how teachers treated you, of micro discriminations and little things. Like, for example, I have a friend of mine and this sounds very little, but as Black people can understand this, and if you have like readers who are not Black can understand this is insight. One of my friends had exam results, and you had your expected grade, and they got the same grade for the main mock. I think it was like a A or B, I can't remember specifically. And his white friend got an expected A. And just for context, they were roughly around the same. They were tracking roughly around the same. They were getting roughly around the same years. And his white friend got expected as an A. He got expected as a B. And he went to his teacher and went, hold on, me and this person are getting similar grades. We're getting literally similar grades. So why isn't our expected matching? And I can see definitely those little microaggressions, micro discriminations, even if it's conscious and unconscious. Sometimes as a Black person, we don't like education. We don't like, because we're treated badly in it. And some teenagers go, if I'm not going to get treated well in it, I'm just not going to put effort into it.
Yeah.
Quite rightfully. If you're going to get treated badly, how are you going to get that love for it? So sometimes, education sometimes is a privilege. Going to uni sometimes is a privilege. And going through the educational system as a Black person can be very, very difficult. So
it can be very, definitely. I remember I had a conversation. It was with Yelata Smith. I think it was like episode 42. I loved talking to her, actually. I should drop her a message. But she was an educator as well in Birmingham. And she had stopped being in the education system for a bit. And I've met quite a few teachers that were in the education system and then have decided to leave for multiple reasons. But there we go. There's another added to the statistics. But she was talking about, the experience that Black boys face. And talking about that, like, she was saying, I think one of the teachers said that they were scared of the Black kids because they were much taller than her, or something along those lines, or just something ridiculous. And it's things like that that can then impact a child's experience in school.
And I think another aspect I add to that part is when I moved to Liverpool, I have a lot of years of education as an unqualified teacher. And then I moved to Liverpool like a year and a half ago to just make it official, get my full teacher training sorted. And that's when I dropped out of education. So even though I've not had official years as a teacher, I've had a lot of build up with it in those years. And one of the things I've noticed by being in schools and talking to teenagers is even the most diverse school, when it comes to population of Black students, minority students, there's not enough diversity of minority and Black teachers. And that itself is another hurdle, because I describe it like this: as men, we can talk about what it's like to be a woman, right? We have mothers, we have sisters, but we do not know what it's like to be a woman. We do not know how to have these hard conversations about what it's like to be a woman. Only a woman can go, okay, I get it. I went through it. And it's a similar thing for black boys and black girls. Teaching things in a certain way to make it easier for and more accessible for black boys and girls sometimes is being black yourself and they go, oh, okay, I'm going to say this reference because I know you're going to get it.
Mm-hmm.
My teaching style is going to be varied a bit more. I may add this. When I'm talking one to one with you, I may word it differently. I may use different examples because we have the same lived experience or similar lived experience to go, okay, I know how to connect with you more. But a lot of schools don't have diversity in the teaching of teachers. So you have teachers who aren't fully connecting with students as much as they could do. And it's not their fault. They're just, you don't have that lived experience. You don't have those
Yeah.
minds hold on and go, this. That's another hurdle. And also another hurdle. And also if you as black boys and girls can't see teachers in the school system, what would inspire them to become teachers themselves? Like, yeah, so going, oh, I had a teacher who was really amazing. A whole idea of representation.
Yeah.
They need to see themselves in someone else in that position to say, oh, okay, I could do this.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit of a sticky one, isn't it? Because as much as I'm sure there are teachers out there, like I knew a teacher, I interviewed him for the podcast actually, but he's moved to Dubai now. I think he was done with the English teaching system. And there's a few who have left the profession, and they've left for multiple reasons. But some of them was the experience of discrimination that they faced. Some of it was what they were seeing just in terms of how school is being taught to kids and how it hasn't, you know, hasn't kept up with the times.
Yeah.
And it's just quite unfortunate because there's loads of black kids here, there's loads of Asian kids in England, there's loads of ethnic minority kids here in England, and if they don't see anyone that looks like them, then it's hard to then look up to them, but then also it's hard for the education system to reach out to them.
Yeah. And as it's two parts of that, I'll go to the discrimination part as well. But one part of that is even the ones that end up loving a topic don't always end up teaching it because go back to representation. You need to see yourself you need to see yourself in someone else sometimes.
Mm.
So you have a lot of people who go into chemistry, biomed, things that you go, okay, cool, you can become a teacher and teach it. But sometimes because that representation is not there, they don't have the interest. They're like, I'm just going to become a scientist. I'm going to do this. Like, you need that representation to go, okay, I can go all the way, get a PhD, and also then go to secondary schools and teach it.
Yeah.
And I think with the discrimination part, I've had experiences before that were like really disconcerting for me. Like I know, and I'll leave everything ambiguity because I'm not going to say names because obviously, but I had one experience where I was wearing my traditional attire, right? Not fully because I had like suit trousers and
Mm.
because I'm union. I had suit trousers and I had underneath like my jasiki, I had like a suit and tie basically. But I put on like a dashiki on over the top
Yeah.
because I'm like, well, I'm feeling like I'm going to show my culture whilst being smart as well. So
Yeah.
and I remember at the end of the day, someone came up to me and was like, "Oh, people were looking at you and going, you looked very unprofessional." And that was like for me, and I still remember this so much to this day because it kind of took a blow for me when I was like, gosh, I have to deal with this,
Yeah.
right? Because, as an African, I'm like, I don't always want to wear a suit and tie. I want to show off. I want to show my colors. And I was like, do I have to restrain my culture in this environment? And I still have to be in this environment for 8 hours for the whole week. Like, And and I know it was subconscious, right? I knew it was a subconscious act of discrimination. No one actively went, this Sydney here is doing this, and
Yeah.
this, but it still hurts. And that was like the big moment of discrimination for me. I was like, oh, this it has a long way to go.
So yeah, it does have a long way to go, doesn't it? So I wanted to ask, in terms of, we were on the topic of education and sort of
Mm.
in your background in academia and in education, how do you hope that your poetries can sort of foster a love for writing, literature, but even for helping others understand their own mental health as well?
Mm. Okay, so I think the first part, how can my book help people go into love with literature and academia? Um, my goal as a writer is how can I give back? Um, I I think I told you in our previous conversation, a measure of success for me as a writer is how many people can I inspire to become writers. So at the moment, and I need to do more of a push on this. I work. I work with schools, and I go in. I help them out. I have workshops with schools, and I have direct interaction with students. And I say, okay, this is what I've gone through. Let's have a teaching workshop together, creative process. And one of the things I personally do is I do active learning. So in my writing workshops, let's say they'll do a task, right? Let's say write a poem about your favorite food as a beginning task. I will write it with them. I'll say, okay, I'm going to be here. I've shared my screen so you can see my own thinking process.
Mm.
Even when I make those mistakes, I'm like, oh, okay, I'm going to change this. It makes it more human. It makes it more, okay, even though I am a published author, this is how we can relate to each other. Sometimes I'm like, I don't know the right metaphor, that I don't know the right technique to use. And I'll literally just say it. I'll say, I don't know what technique to use. Like sometimes people get really scared with the writing because they're like, oh, should I use this? Should I use this? I'll say, in this situation, I don't know what to use. So I'm going to leave it blank for a bit and come back into it. It's showing the process and showing the love of the process. And then the day, what may be the outcome, this lovely poem or short story, in showing, okay, through that, we went through all these lists of stuff. We went through the hardships of it. Sometimes being like, I don't know what I'm writing. I'm like, cool, I feel you. And just making it human, making writing less daunting and going, cool, here's the end result. Is it the best? Don't care. It's my work. You created it. It's your best work because it has you in you in it. And in the end of the day, I think that's probably the best way to get kids and people into writing. Going through the whole, first liking the process of it and talking them through the process of it so that they can know, okay, through the process is not up and down. This person's going through the process with me. And it's also going, the end result is something you should be proud of because you created it. It's your piece of work. Tomorrow you'll write something else and be like, oh, I'm really proud of this because it's your piece of work. I think that's how, for education, my books and the work that I do, I get kids into writing, just saying, be proud of your work, be proud of what you do, and don't put too much pressure of it being the best piece of writing, the best story. If it's journalism, the best article. You've done that. You put your knowledge into it, you put your love into it, your wisdom into it. Be proud of it.
Mm.
And what was the second part of the question? Yeah.
For mental health, how, because we've talked a lot about mental health, so like,
Yeah.
how can your book sort of inspire people to focus on their mental health and even realizing it?
For mental health, I would say it's going back to this understanding one's own feelings and feeling represented by my pieces.
Yeah.
Reading something and going, I've been through that. Pardon me? Go reading through it and be like, I've been through this experience before. Reading through it and saying, feeling like you're not alone in it. Especially like looking through the black window is the feeling that I'm not alone. This person has gone through this, and going back to my writing style and my publishing style of authorship is my pieces and my work don't focus on me as a person. It focuses on the lived experiences that I've had from other people. So when someone's reading it, this is a perspective of more than one person. Many people have gone through this. I'm not alone. I think that's how it helps with the mental health, is in feeling I'm not alone. I feel like putting things in context, and looking through the black window would be, again, go back to acknowledging one's feelings, and then going, okay, I'm not alone in this. This writer, this poet, this piece of work shows that I'm not going crazy. Right? This feeling is normal, and then humanizing it. And then once you've acknowledged it, once you acknowledge it, it doesn't feel as big anymore because you know what you're facing. I'm going to say an example, which in my head has just come up. Like Scooby Doo.
Yeah.
Sometimes when it comes to mental health, we get really scared because we don't know what this monster is. And you're like, oh my word, I feel this is on top of me. But when you acknowledge what it is and you think, reading like through my book, acknowledging that I feel sad, what sad do I feel? How do I feel? You realize, oh, actually, it wasn't that big. It was just something in costume. That kind of thing. Because our brain doesn't like ambiguity. Ambiguity scares it. It makes something that is as tiny as, I feel a little bit anxious about work, into, oh my word, I'm the worst employee ever, I'm going to get fired. But when you acknowledge it and you go, oh, I'm really nervous about this one small aspect of work. Okay, how do I solve that? Instead of I'm going to get fired, is, okay, maybe I can do this and this will save me a bit more time on this. It just puts things in perspective.
Yeah, definitely. No, I like the Scooby Doo reference as well. I'm always a sucker for references, so any that can be brought in. So Sydney, I've loved this whole conversation that we've had. And I just wanted to ask you one final question, which I always ask all my guests. And if there's a young Black boy listening to this conversation, how can something that help them with an understanding of themselves?
I would say to all the young Black boys and girls out there that it will be very hard. It's sometimes very hard to show who you are to the world, because it won't always be seen as the norm, and people will look down on it sometimes, and people may question it. But you lose nothing by showing yourself, by showing your love. And if people don't like it, that's their problem. You're showing yourself. In life, it's better to be true to yourself and your morals and your values. And if you stay with that, you never lose out. Because at the end of the day, if you lose everything, you still have your morals and your values. And you should show that every single day, even if people may not like it, even if it's uncomfortable for the world. Those are your morals and your values. Those are your passions. Those are your loves. And just enjoy it.
Well, no, thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Question was one that I really had to think about that quite a lot.
No, that's good. I always like making my guests think about something. So, where can people find you? Where can people find your books? Where people can find your poetry? Let them know.
Yes. So, side note, I just noticed, this is going to sound like a random ramble, but one of the things I do, And I like when I say I know I've done it a few times. There's a little habit that I picked up from my brother. He does it all the time. And now that I'm like, oh my word, I'm literally becoming a bit of my brother. So back to how can I my work. Um, so when it comes to my books, I've got Amazon is the quickest way. I'm available. So my first book, Looking Through the Black Window, is solely available on Amazon. So that's the quickest way, quicker shipping. Um, looking so, and then This Soul of Mine is available on most major websites and bookstores, Waterstones, Parks and Nobles for Parks and Noble. I think that's the American one. Um, World of Books. If it's a really big bookstore, online bookstore, be there. Last time I checked. But again, I think Amazon's probably the best way. But if you're not with This Soul of Mine, if you're not someone who wants to advocate for Amazon, I know people like that. That's completely fine. The Soul of Mine is available on most major online bookstores.
Yeah, I tried to have a ban from buying books from Amazon, but it's just too convenient, man. It's just too convenient. They know what they're doing.
It makes total sense, and that's why I'm so happy This Soul of Mine is available on most online bookstores, because it's like, cool, if you don't want to go to Amazon, here you go.
That's true. Yeah.
Otherwise, I've got my Instagram, which I do most of my promotional work and my work in general, which is Sydney_Conteh. That's Sydney_Conteh. I put on that, it has a link to everything that I do, my portfolio, my books, everything that is me is in my link tree, which is available on my Instagram. And if you want, I can send it to you so you can post it in the description if you want as well. And yeah, I think that's the best way to see me. My Instagram and with my books is for the people who want to go on Amazon, just write my name, Sydney Conteh. For my second book, is everywhere, which is mad to say, to have a book available everywhere.
That's great position to be in, and you've worked hard for it. Yeah. So definitely. So no,
it's thank you. I'm actually that good. That's weird.
Published author, mate. Published author. Come on.
Super confident. Have asked. Just don't doubt themselves ever.
Yeah. Nah, bro. So yeah, so Sydney, thank you very much for joining me. I'm gonna put all your links into the show notes so people can go and check that out too. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening as well.
You too. Thank you so much. It's been very insightful, and thank you for giving me this opportunity in this space. Definitely appreciate it.
God bless.